Imagine this. The year is 1944, and delegates from 44 different countries are gathered at the Mount Washington Hotel in New Hampshire. In that hall, a decision is about to be made that will shape the global economy for the next 80 years. Britain, after 2 world wars, is financially broke. The country's debt has soared to 249% of GDP. Once a naval superpower, Britain, whose financial power was recognized all over the world, is now exhausted and everyone knows it. So, a historic decision is made. The British pound, as the global reserve currency, is replaced by the US dollar. This is not just a financial change. It is actually the continuation of a cycle that has been ongoing for 500 years. Every world reserve currency in history has gone through a rise, a peak, overextension, and collapse. And now the US dollar is showing the warning signs of this phase. To understand this process, we need to go back in time. Let's go to 1450. Back then, Portugal had the world's first real reserve currency, the Portuguese real. For about 80 years, Portugal was at the center of global trade. But this success was not a coincidence. Portugal revolutionized global trade by discovering new sea routes to Africa, Asia, and America. When the Ottomans captured Constantinople in 1453, closing the old spice trade routes, Portugal sailed around Africa and launched a new era of discovery. Lisbon had now become the trading center of the world. At the height of its empire, Portugal stretched from India to Japan and even to China. But as with all successes, this one also led to overreach. Maintaining military outposts on 4 continents began draining Portugal's treasury. Competition from the Dutch, English, and French grew. Then a royal succession crisis in the 1530s destabilized the kingdom. By 1580, Portugal was absorbed by Spain. The Portuguese real, which had ruled the world for 80 years, was replaced by Spain's silver. In 1545, Spain discovered the world's richest silver mine in Potosi, Bolivia. Between 1575 and 1635, this mine produced nearly half of the world's silver. The Spaniards minted pieces of 8 coins from this silver, and these became the world's most trusted and recognized currency. This was, in fact, the first global currency. The Spanish dollar remained the most reliable currency in the Western world from the 16th to the 19th century. But Spain's time came to an end as well. It defaulted 4 times, as the silver from the New World fueled inflation. By the early 1600s, the silver supply began to decline, and the economy started to collapse. Holland rose to prominence in the mid-1600s. Amsterdam became the world's financial center, and the Dutch guilder became the leading currency in European trade. The Dutch had laid the foundations for modern finance. They were the first to create a stock market, marine insurance, and public companies. But they too made the same mistake. Military expenses, wars, and the collapse of the West India Company led Holland to bankruptcy. By the late 1700s, England had risen, and the pound sterling became the new global reserve currency. Britain held the world's reserve currency from the 1720s to 1944, a period of 200 years. At its peak, 60% of world trade was conducted in pounds. London was the center of trade, insurance, and investment. But then the collapse began. World War I exploded Britain's debt, and World War II left the country in even worse shape. By 1945, its debt had reached 270% of GDP, signaling the end of Britain's financial power. And so, we arrive at that historic meeting at Bretton Woods in 1944. Delegates from 44 countries gathered to rebuild the global financial system. This meeting gave birth to the IMF and the World Bank. The Bretton Woods Agreement tied the world's currencies to the US dollar, and the dollar was pegged to gold. A new world order was taking shape. The pound was being replaced by the dollar. The dollar rose to prominence, but in 1971, when President Nixon suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold, the gold standard ended. But the dollar did not collapse. Instead, a new system was set up based on oil. After the 1970s OPEC oil crisis, the U.S. struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. Saudi oil would only be sold in U.S. dollars. Thus, the petrodollar system was born. Now every country needed dollars to buy oil, which allowed America to continue running deficits that would have crushed any other country. But in recent years, the dollar's dominance has been questioned. In the 2000s, the dollar accounted for 70% of the world's foreign exchange reserves, but by 2024, that figure had dropped to 58%. The BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa, are developing their own payment systems and are beginning to use their own currencies instead of the dollar. The U.S.'s debts are also growing rapidly. By the beginning of 2025, the U.S. public debt had reached $29 trillion, and total debt had soared to $36 trillion. In other words, a historical pattern is repeating: rise, peak, overextension, and collapse. Empires like Portugal, Spain, Holland, and Britain reigned for periods ranging from 78 to 220 years, and the U.S. dollar has been in this position for 81 years. Slowly but surely, we are approaching the end of this pattern. Many countries are looking for alternatives to the dollar. How quickly will this change happen? No one knows. But history tells us that this is a transition.